Welcome to Multigrain. Multigrain is a stereomorphing granular sampler module. This video provides an overview of all the main features to get you started. Let's begin with a quick tour of the panel. We have a row of 8 sound buttons, a row of function buttons including our modulation assignment pages, 2 scene buttons with a morph fader that scans between them, 10 knobs and 3 buttons that control the granular engine, the sample button highlighted with a red ring. At the top we have stereo audio inputs and outputs, gate and next inputs used to trigger multigrain sounds from external modules or devices, assignable modulation inputs X, Y and Z, assignable modulation outputs A and B, sound selection CV input, a dedicated morph fader CV input with a tenuverter, a sync input to synchronize grains with your system clock, and finally the micro SD card that stores your projects, presets and sounds. In simple terms, grains are tiny slices of audio generated from a longer sample. We can use granular synthesis to zero in on a small section of a sample and then use it to create completely new timbres and textures. On Multigrain, you can create granular sounds from multiple samples. The sound buttons allow you to select and play grains from up to 8 sound sources. Hold the sound button to create a steady stream of grains, or use Latch to do this for you. While latched, you can switch between sounds. Although you can only trigger one sound at a time, it is possible for grains from different sounds to overlap. Press the Latch button again to disable it. Let's pick a sound to demonstrate the granular controls. When I press it, the sound becomes active on the panel, indicated by the blinking sound button. Also take note of the blinking scene button. A scene is like a snapshot of the granular parameters. This includes the position of the 10 knobs and the reverse setting. Every sound has 2 scenes that you can morph between, but we'll cover this later. To ensure you hear your edits, the morph fader position just needs to match with the active scene. Now for the grain controls. The reverse button changes the direction of sample playback within the grain. This can be toggled on or off. Shape controls the amplitude envelope of each grain. There are 7 shapes to choose from. By default, we start with 2 key. Then we have exponential, bell, sync, triangle, ramp up, and rectangle. Level controls the volume for each grain. Tone applies a 2-pole filter to each grain. Counterclockwise from center applies a low pass, and clockwise from center applies a high pass. In the center position, no filtering is applied. The next 3 controls, rate, size, and pitch, are linked together by default using these 2 buttons. Pitch sets the playback speed of the sample in a grain. Turning clockwise from center increases the pitch, and we can go up 2 octaves. Turning counterclockwise, we decrease the pitch, again going down 2 octaves. The parameter LED below the knob turns green at octave intervals and at original pitch. Every value in between is shown as red. Size sets the grain length, ranging from 4 seconds all the way down to 20 milliseconds. Rate determines the frequency at which grains are generated. All 3 of these controls are currently linked. You'll notice that if I change the pitch, the size and rate of the grains will also change. Smaller and faster when pitched up, and larger and slower when pitched down. If I unlink pitch from size, the grain size and rate remains constant while the sample audio plays back faster or slower, allowing more or less of the sample content to be heard in each grain. I can still use size to change the rate of grains. With rate at 0 as it is now, a new grain starts at the end of the last one. If I unlink size from rate, in this configuration, the grains stop. With rate unlinked and at 0, we only fire a single grain every time the sound is triggered. Let's turn rate back up again to start grains flowing. As I turn rate back up and reduce the size, you can hear an audible gap between grains as the rate remains constant while the size changes. Let's quickly switch samples and return to the pitch control for a second. On multigrain, it's possible to quantize the pitch control to a scale set by the Quantizer. To access the Quantizer, press Alt and then press Quant. With the Quantizer page open, the buttons at the bottom of the module turn into the keys of a single octave keyboard. Select notes for the pitch to quantize to. Now when I turn the pitch control, we're locked into a scale. If I reduce this down to one note, we get octave quantization. For harmonically rich content, it's often good to use octaves or octaves and fifths. To exit the Quantizer, press Exit. And if we want to clear quantization, hold Clear and press Quant. Now we're back to unquantized control. Blur is a global reverb-like effect. The blur knob controls the send amount of each grain to the effect. It also controls the decay amount globally. So in summary, all of these controls together determine the characteristics of each grain at the moment that it's created. Now let's move on to the three black position knobs, Start, Wrap, and Scan. These are used to search through a sample and isolate an area to generate grains from. Let's get our guitar sample going and reduce the size a little bit. So Start sets the initial starting point in the sample from which grains are generated. By default, it's set to the very beginning of the sample. If I sweep the Start control, you'll hear how we move through the sample. Let's go back to the beginning. Scan advances the start point of each subsequent grain through the sample. When a sound is being played, or latched as it is now, clockwise will scan forwards. And counterclockwise scans backwards. In the center position, scanning stops where it is. Now if I re-trigger the sound, the grains will reset to our original starting position. Wrap sets a boundary for scan. By default, wrap is set to 100%, so if we scan, we'll move through the entire sample. Let's reduce this to a smaller area. When scan reaches the wrap point, it wraps back to the start and scans through again. And when scanning in reverse, scan reaches the start point and loops back to the wrap point instead. If I change the start point, wrap will move with it. As briefly mentioned before, multigrain has two parameter states called Scene A and Scene B. We can use the Morph fader to transition between these scenes seamlessly. This can create subtle or drastic changes in the characteristics of grains produced from one sound. Let's try a simple example of morphing to show you exactly how it works. So on scene A, I have this basic looping sound. Let's copy the scene settings from A to B. Hold the scene A button, and then press the scene B button to paste. Now when I move the morph fader, you'll hear that nothing happens. And this is because the settings in both scenes are exactly the same. So let's make some changes to scene B. Let's reduce the size. And then increase the pitch. Now when we morph back to scene A, listen to how the parameters gradually change back to their original position. Now let's make another change to scene B, but this time without moving the morph fader to hear it. Press the scene B button to make it active on the panel. Now we can make some changes silently. Let's turn up blur. And let's also turn up tone a little bit so we get some high pass in the grains. And now let's morph to scene B. To summarize, you can morph all of the 10 granular controls and the reverse button across all sounds. The morph fader position is universal, so it will always morph between the scenes of every available sound. Be sure to explore all the sweet spots in between your scenes. The patch points on multigrain allow for external control and modulation of sounds. The gate input triggers the last sound that was played. If I plug this into the next input, you can step through all of your sounds sequentially. Next is normal to gate, meaning that you can use one gate signal to step through and trigger your sounds.
1.
While we've been stepping through our sounds, you may have noticed that the LED for the sound that we're hearing is fading, while the active sound on the panel is still blinking. This is because the active panel does not change with external CV, and this allows you to stay focused on the sound that you're editing while others are playing. The select input allows you to select sounds using CV in any order that you like, for example with a sequencer or with planar here. Let's patch the X-axis output into the select CV input, and then I'll also patch the gate output into the gate input of multigrain. With the joystick in the center position, planar outputs 0 volts and we select sound 1. The 8 sounds are mapped across 5 volts. This scale does not change. So if a sound is empty, it's simply ignored while using select. Negative voltage is rectified, so our selection is mirrored when we push the joystick in the opposite direction. The morph input modulates the position of the morph fader. Let's demonstrate this by using an LFO from VCO1U and plugging it into the morph input. Let's latch on sound 2. And then I'm going to use the attenuverter to control the range of modulation. We can also use the morph fader itself as an offset for the modulation. The morph fader LED helps us to visualize the position of the morph fader as it's being modulated between both scenes. The sync input is used to synchronize the rate of grain generation to a clock, but we'll demonstrate this in another video. You can also find more information about it in the manual. X, Y, and Z are freely assignable modulation inputs. Let's patch the X-axis of planar into X and the Y-axis into Y. Let's pick a sound to work with. Just going to adjust it slightly. To assign modulation from these inputs, press the Mod Page button with the same letter. The page button blinks yellow to show that it's active on the panel. The 10 knobs now become attenuverters which control the polarity and amount of modulation per control. Positive attenuation of a control is shown with a yellow LED, and negative attenuation is shown with a purple LED. In the center position, the attenuator is off. You can also assign modulation to alternate the state of the reverse button. Let's assign modulation to the start position. and perhaps a little bit to tone. And then in the y-axis, let's apply some modulation to pitch. Once you've finished assigning modulation, press Exit. The mod page buttons will remain lit to show that modulation is being applied. Modulation counts as a scene setting, meaning that you can morph from one modulation state to another. Let's set up another quick example. I'm going to clear the scene settings and then also the modulation settings. Let's have a listen to the sound again. Let's pick a different start point. Let's reduce the size. Increase the rate slightly. And then let's copy scene A to scene B so that there's no other morphing going on other than the modulation that we're about to apply. We'll take a cycling envelope from Quadrax and plug that into modulation input Z. Then on scene A, we'll open the Z assignment page and we'll apply positive modulation to pitch. And then on scene B, let's apply negative modulation to pitch. Press Exit. And now when we morph between the two, the same modulation has a different effect on each scene. We also have an internal random modulation source per control. This is applied in the same way as X, Y, or Z. Press the Rand button to open the assignment page, and then apply your random modulation amounts. To exit the assignment page, press Exit. Random modulation also has some unique properties when applied to certain controls. We'll explain these further another time, but to show you one example, if we go into Rand and apply negative modulation to level, you can hear that we get a random panning effect. Up until now, we've been using the default sounds to create grains with, but multigrain allows you to sample your own sounds for granulizing. You can sample from the stereo inputs or by internally resampling the output audio. It's also possible to pull samples from the always listening buffer, which is constantly recording the last 32 seconds of audio. In this video, we'll cover the most basic workflow for sampling. To get started, let's patch the output of Plonk to the input of multigrain. Press through to enable monitoring through the module. The input also monitors through the current blur setting. When you're ready, press the sample button to record. Press the sample button again to stop. The sample button and the available sound buttons will now fade blue, meaning that the sample that we just recorded is ready for assignment. To save the sample to the microSD and to assign it to the empty sound, in this case sound 8, we're going to simply press it once. The sample is now assigned to sound 8 and it's in an initialized state. From here we can play with the new sound to make our grains. As well as recording samples, we can also load them from the micro SD card. Let's clear the sound that we just created. Hold clear and press the sound button. This resets the grain settings and also clears the sample. But don't worry, it's still saved on the micro SD card. Press the Alt button to go to the Alt page. The Alt page gives you access to a number of secondary functions, such as the Quantizer that we used earlier. We'll explain all of the functions on the Alt page in another video, but you can find more information now in the manual. From this page, we can load samples from 3 folders: Project, WAVs, or Recs. The Project folder contains samples from within our current project. The WAVs folder contains samples which are globally accessible to any project. The Recs folder contains samples that you've recorded, sorted chronologically with the newest first. This is also globally accessible to any project. I'm going to select WAVs. The sample loading controls remain active so that we can navigate through samples in our folder using the previous and next buttons, while the rest of the controls revert to their primary functions. I'm going to choose this sample. Now I can press Exit to close the sample loading controls, and we can play with our new sample to create new grains. With all the progress that we've made today, it's probably about time that we save this preset. Multigrain can store up to 48 presets in a project, and there are 48 projects available on Multigrain. To save this preset, we're going to press Alt, and then we're going to press the Save button, which brings us to our Save page. The X, Y, and Z buttons represent banks 1, 2, and 3. If you press one of the buttons twice, it'll blink faster, indicating that we're now selecting 4, 5, and 6. Let's go back to bank 1. The sound buttons represent the 8 locations in a bank to save your presets to. The first one is lit up, showing that it's occupied. It's also blinking, which indicates that it was the last preset to be saved. All the rest of the sound buttons are off, which means that they're empty. So let's save to one of those locations. Press the sound button once to save. The preset's now saved, and we're back to the primary controls. Loading works in the same way. Press Alt, and then press the Load button. We can see our banks, and also our preset locations to load from. While we're in the Load, Save, or Project screens, you can switch between them seamlessly. And we can exit at any time by pressing the Exit button. If you do forget to save, Multigrain has an autosave state in each project, which remembers the last settings applied regardless of the presets. Multigrain comes with some demo projects to get you started, such as this one, and more will be available on our website in time. That's all for this brief overview of Multigrain. More information on all of the functions and features such as sync, fine-tune, and the advanced sampling interface can be found in the manual. A more in-depth series of video manuals will also be available soon. Thanks for watching, and we hope that you enjoy exploring Multigrain.